In this video, we're going to do a reading ACT passage walkthrough. I'll show you how I think, I'll show you my logic, and I'll show you how ACT is trying to trick you. I'm Katya Severson, the inventor of the Severson method, a scientifically proven way to learn anything fast. Let's do an ACT reading passage. Before we begin, I want to remind you that ACT is a standardized test. Therefore, there is only two ways for the ACT to create correct answer choices. It's either restatement or demonstration. If you don't know what these are, I'm going to link some videos for you to check out later. If you're all good, you know what restatement is, you know what a demonstration is, we can get going. Here's how I'm going to do this. I picked a passage. It's a humanities passage from one of the official ACT tests. You can find it, the copy on their website. I'll definitely link the link below to the copy. So I want you to get to passage number 3, and once you pull that up, you could either solve it without me and then look at how I was thinking about it, what my thought process was, or you can just pull it up and hang out with me and we can solve it together. Step 1. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read the blurb, then I'm going to read the questions. I'm going to prime my brain for knowing what will be in the passage, and then I will read the passage and I will be answering questions as I'm reading the passage. I'll talk to you about each and every answer choice because I don't want you to forget that answer choices are just as valid portions of the question as the question prompt itself. Remember to pay very close attention to details and channel your inner lawyer because you need to be reading this passage as if you're a lawyer reading a contract. Let's get going. So, step 1, we're going to read the blurb. This passage is adapted from the article Proceed with Caution, Using Native American Folk Tales in the Classroom by Debbie Reese, 2007. So it's a contemporary article, sounds good. Now, question number 21. I already see a lot of text here, so I want to be careful about understanding the question deeply. The passage author's reaction, so the reaction of the narrator or the author, to which of the following experiences best exemplifies the point that she brings her own cultural intuition to her reading and research. All right, so cultural intuition, reading and research, that she brings her own experiences. Where does the author show that she brings her experience to cultural intuition to her reading and research? Okay, great. Very confusing way to say this. And ACT did not have to word it this way. They do this on purpose because they probably want you to fall for one of these trappy answer choices. Okay, next question. The main purpose of the first paragraph, lines 1 to line 24, is to... So this is kind of funny because this includes text by someone else. So this is going to be question number 22. Okay, now 23. The passage, and this is the purpose. And by the way, you can ignore the word main, as if there are like many purposes. You choose the main purpose. There's purpose, one purpose. The reason ACT is using words like main or best or probably best because they're trying to push you into the world of analysis and they want you to come up with your own opinion and maybe like sell yourselves on one of these answer choices. Not true. So the purpose of the first paragraph is to, the passage author, the author of the passage, most strongly suggests that a particular group would deem one of its own stories to be unacceptable if, during a telling, the storyteller. Okay. So what this is saying is that a particular group would think of something as unacceptable. So these are your locators. One function of this passage author's statement that her home pueblo is very different from other pueblos in New Mexico. So she says something that her pueblo is different from other pueblos in New Mexico. We need a function for that. The passage author most strongly implies, most strongly can be ignored because there's only one thing, that whether Pueblo elders will approve a book for the children of the community depends on the books. Okay, so they're elders and they approve of a book. As she's presented in the passage, Silco, I'm going to circle because that's a name, indicates that one purpose for Laguna Pueblo hunting stories was to Laguna Pueblo. Let's just put a box over it because that's not a personal name. Hunting stories was to help hunters. Okay, so there are some stories and they help hunters in some sort of a way. We need to figure out how. The passage author most directly, connects her knowledge to the distinctions between and across American Indian tribal nations to her experiences as. So the author connects her experiences to the distinctions between and across American Indian tribal nations. Okay? And as it is used in line 66, so this is the only vocabulary in context question. 66, the word great, so that's 28. And 29, which of the following characteristics among the several Pueblo communities in New Mexico does the passage author most directly use as evidence of their diversity? So there's diversity for Pueblos, and there is some characteristic that the author is going to use. It's going to be one of these four. And then the passage author states that kivas are places she associates with. So there are kivas, and there are places that she associates with something. All right, let's do this. Traditional stories include myths, legends, and folk tales rooted in the oral storytelling tradition of given people. Through story, people pass their religious beliefs, customs, history, lifestyle, language, values, and the places they hold sacred from one generation to the next. As such, stories and their telling are more than simple entertainment. What are they? That's just for me. They matter in significant ways to well-being of the communities from which they originate. Acclaimed Laguna Pueblo, we have, it's actually Laguna Pueblo, is acclaimed Laguna Pueblo writer Leslie Marmon Silco, we had a question about her, writes that the oral narrative or story was the medium by which the Pueblo people transmitted, and now this is a quote, an entire culture, a worldview, a complete with proven worldview complete with proven strategies for survival. In her discussion of hunting stories, she says, and then this is what she says about the hunting stories. These accounts contained information or critical importance about the behavior and migration patterns of mule deer. Hunting stories carefully described key landmarks and locations of fresh water. Thus, a deer hunt story might also serve as a map. Lost travelers and lost piñon nut gatherers have been saved by citing a rock formation they recognize only because they once heard a hunting story describing this rock formation. Great. So first and foremost, we have a few questions about this area. We have question number 2. It's asking us about the 22. It's about the purpose. The purpose of the first paragraph is, okay, let's consider all of them. Let's start at J. Demonstrate that folk tales measure how a culture's worldview has changed over time. Well, even though this passage does say that through story, people pass their religious beliefs, customs, history, lifestyle, language, values as the places they hold sacred from one generation to the next, but they're not talking about how cultures has changed over time. So J is incorrect. Let's go next. H. Contrast the purpose of folk tales with those of myths and legends. No, there's no comparison. They're all talking about everything together. Discuss the value of traditional stories and their function within a community. Okay, so I think it could be a good answer choice because it's talking about the value. They matter in significant ways to the well-being of the communities from which they originate. So I think that this is a restatement, because discuss the value of traditional stories and their functions in the community. I think this is a direct restatement, R, but let's go to F. Explain how traditional stories change as they are passed from one generation to the next. Well, then it's very similar to J, but is this restated somewhere or demonstrated? Traditional stories include through story, change values, places they hold sacred from one generation to the next. Do stories change, or do they hold them sacred? They hold them sacred. That means they try to keep them, preserve them. They don't keep them, they don't change them. So change is the word that makes this answer choice incorrect. Goodbye, F. G is our answer. 23. The passage author most strongly suggests that a particular, sorry, not 23, my bet, because there is a question about Silco and about hunting stories. And here's the piece about hunting stories. So I suggest that we jump in here, answer this question now before we have forgotten all the context. So hunting stories was to help hunters. What does it do for hunters? Let's consider starting from J. Find catches of food by following trails made by piñon nut gatherers. It was something about piñon, lost travelers and lost piñon nut gatherers, but they're not finding food. Not find food of by following trails made by piñon nut gatherers. No, piñon nut gatherers. See, it's using the words from the right places, but it's completely confusing the relationships. Lost travelers and lost piñon gatherers have been saved by citing a rock formation they recognize only because they once heard a hunting story describing this rock formation, not because you can find food by following piñon nut gatherers. So J is confused relationship. J is out. Identify the behavior and migration patterns of game. Okay, by game they mean the animals. These accounts contain information. Let's just look if this is anywhere in the passage. These accounts contain information of critical importance about the behavior and migration patterns of mule deer. Mule deer is going to be, I'm assuming it's game. So it looks like it's a classical restatement, but as a trained test taker, I want to check G and F real quick because I want to see whether I've missed anything. Document the number of successful hunts. No, we're not documenting a number of successful hunts. And this is just kind of a logical answer. If you didn't read it, you had no idea, and you were like, well, what could hunting stories be? Documenting successful hunts. No. Locate and rescue lost hunters from other tribes. Well, it is about locate and rescue lost hunters, but not from other tribes. Therefore, goodbye. Our answer is H. Let's continue reading. Similarly, children's book author Joseph Bruchok writes, rather than being a mere myths, with myth being used in the pejorative sense of untruth, those ancient traditional tales were a distillation of the deep knowledge held by the many Native American nations about the workings of the world around them. Okay, we can continue. I don't think there's a question about this. Thus, storytelling is a means of passing along information, but it does not mean there's only one correct version of any given story. During a telling, listeners can speak up if they feel an important fact or detail was omitted, or want to offer a different version of the story. In this way, the people seek or arrive at a communal truth rather than an absolute truth. A storyteller may revise a story according to his or her own interpretation or according to the knowledge of the audience, but in order for it to be acceptable to the group from which the story originated, it should remain true to the spirit and content of the original. My suspicion is that this is where the answer will be for one of the questions. So I'm just going to mark it up. Traditional stories originate from a specific people, and we expect them to accurately reflect those people. but do they? As Pueblo Indian women, I wonder, what do our stories look like when they are retold outside of our communities, in picture book format and marketed as Native American folk tales for children? Are our religious, cultural, and social values presented accurately? Are children who read these folk tales learning anything useful about us? Much of what I bring to bear on my research, emanates, I'm not sure what that word is actually, from my culture lens and identify as a Pueblo Indian woman. So there was a question about her identifying as Pueblo Indian woman from Nambe Pueblo. I was born at the Indian Hospital in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and raised on our reservation. As a Pueblo Indian child, I was given a tewa, our language name, and taught to dance. I went to religious ceremonies and gatherings, and I learned how to do a range of things that we do as Pueblo people. This childhood provided me with cultural intuition. Cultural intuition is that body of knowledge anyone acquires based upon their lived experience in anywhere in a specific place. As a scholar in American Indian Studies, I know that there are great distinctions between and across American Indian tribes and nations. Okay, great distinctions. Question number 28. Based on line, so great most possibly means, let me consider all the answer choices, splendid. Now I'm going to try to plug in the word splendid back into the sentence. As a scholar in American Indian Studies, I know there are splendid distinctions, what doesn't sound good. Exuberant distinctions, like over the top, I don't think so. Excessive, also. Excessive and exuberant, they're kind of similar. Therefore, splendid is my choice. I'm going to try to check it, plug it back into the sentence. There's splendid distinctions. Not splendid. I'm going to go with significant and try to plug in significant. There are significant distinctions between and across American Indian, definitely works out. Here, for instance, my home Pueblo is very different from other Pueblos in New Mexico, among which there are several different language groups. Okay, so there was something about difference. One function, the passage author's statements that her home Pueblo is very different from other Pueblos in Mexico is 2. Okay, what is she going to do? List the criteria she uses to evaluate books marketed as Native American folktales. No, I see what they're trying to do because Native American folktales appears here. This is where she gives an example of a picture book that demonstrates her religious, cultural, and social values, and she's like wondering, what do other people think? It has nothing to do with one Pueblo being different from another Pueblo. It has to do with her culture, Pueblo Indian, being different from the rest of the world. So, J is out. H. Directly compare the stories of several American Indian tribal nations to those of her tribe. First of all, the word directly scares me. She doesn't directly compare anything. The reason she says, my Pueblo is different, for instance, my house Pueblo is very different from the other Pueblos in New Mexico, among which there are several different language groups. It is not because she wants to compare stories of several American Indian. No, this is not true. G. Help support her later analysis and critique of McDermott book. Well, if I were to scan the rest of the text, I would see that she is in fact talking about Gerald McDermott. This is in italics, so I'm assuming this is the book, and she's talking about it. But I'm going to leave this as a possibility. Describe the culture and traditions of her home Pueblo. Well, does she really launch after she says, for instance, my home Pueblo is very different from other Pueblos? Does she launch into describing her traditions? Describe the culture and traditions of her home? She doesn't do that. So F is wrong. It has to be G. I draw upon both my cultural intuition and knowledge when reading a book about Pueblo Indians. For example, when I read Gerald McDermott's Arrow to the Sun, A Pueblo Indian Tale, 1974, I wonder what Pueblo book is about. There are 19 different pueblos in Mexico City and more in Arizona. In which pueblo did this story originate? That information is not included anywhere in the book, and there are other problems as well. In the climax of the story, the boy must prove himself by passing through the kiva of lions, the kiva of serpents, a kiva of bees, and the kiva of lightning. Okay, I remember there was a question about kiva, I think that's the last one, where he fights those animals, where he fights those elements. McDermott's kivas are frightening places of trial and battle, but I know kivas are safe places of worship and instruction. Okay, so how does she perceive them? She perceives them as places of worship and instruction. It's actually kind of interesting that this is right here for us. Fear and trial. Well, this is because the author is considering them frightening places of trial. Yeah, therefore they're giving you this tricky answer choice. Mystery and excitement, rest and healing from illness. No, this is the right answer choice. 29. Which of the following characteristics... Oh no, I haven't finished reading it. The descriptions that are culturally acceptable at one pueblo are not necessarily acceptable at a different pueblo. As such, elders at one pueblo would say the book could be used with their children, while elders at another pueblo would disagree. This is not a question of cultural authenticity. It is one of appropriateness in teaching given a specific audience. Okay, I think I had a question about that too, something about elders. Oh, here you go, 25. The passage author implies that whether pueblo elders will approve a book for their children or their community depends on the book's... Okay, so I think this was here rather than here. During storytelling, they can speak up. In this way, people seek or arrive at communal truth. A storyteller may revise a story according to his or her own interpretation, according to his knowledge or audience, but in order for it to be acceptable to the group from which the story originated, it should remain true to the spirit and content of the original. Okay, let's go see D. Successful representation of the worldview of many cultural groups. Well, that's not true because we don't have that. That's not what constitutes appropriate. Appropriateness and relevance to that of community's values, well, that's probably it, because true to the spirit, it should remain true to the spirit and content of the original. But in order for it to be acceptable to the group from which the story originated, it should remain true to the spirit and content of the original. It should... the authors implies that whether Pueblo elders would approve a book for children in their community depends on the book's appropriateness. Yeah, the word... This is not a question of cultural authenticity. It is one of appropriateness in teaching given a specific audience. So I think this is the right answer. Popularity, no. Entertainment value compared to similar books. No, this is definitely C. So now let's go back to 23. The passage author most strongly suggests that a particular group would deem, which means consider, one of its own stories to be unacceptable if, during the storytelling, the storyteller incorporated a new detail. Well, is that appropriate? During the storytelling, and the storytelling is means of passing along information, but it does not mean there's only one correct version. People seek... A storyteller may revise the story according to his or her own interpretation. All right, so a storyteller can do that, so A is out. They cannot all of a sudden deem the story unacceptable. The only reason most kids will get this question incorrect is because they are not reading the question itself. The passage author most strongly suggests that the particular group would deem one of its own stories to be unacceptable. And here in the passage, We don't have the word unacceptable. We're talking about accepting. We're talking about positive. So what you need to do is you need to flip it upside down. So whatever is mentioned here, it will also be mentioned here, but it will be incorrect. So incorporated the detail, you can do that. Used his or her own experiences to interpret one event in the story. Let's see if there was experiences. Or according to the knowledge. Okay, a storyteller may revise a story according to his or her interpretation or according to the knowledge of the audience. Okay, so you can use your own interpretation. C, agreed with an audience member adding a detail. I already saw it here. During a telling, listeners can speak up if they feel an important fact or detail was omitted or want to offer a different version of the story. There you go. So all of these things could be done. You can immediately pick D, but let's read it. Significantly change the spirit of the story. And at the very end here, remain true to the spirit and content of the original. Spirit. So far we have answered 7 questions. So we have 3 more to go. Let's go back to the very first one. A very confusing wording here. Thank you, ACT. Best exemplifies her cultural intention of her reading and research. Okay. Discussing the oral narrative with Silka. We don't see that. She doesn't even do that. Presenting her research to a Pueblo community other than her own. And that is something that is a point where she brings her own cultural intuition to her reading and research. We were talking about cultural intuition here. Is the body of knowledge specific place a scholar? Okay, so it's here. Body, a specific age as a scholar in American Indian studies. I know that there are great distinctions. Okay. Presenting research. Well, I don't think that there is a place where she is presenting. Yeah, there isn't. So what they're looking for is they're looking for demonstration. Started to say restate, and they're looking for a demonstration where the author is bringing her cultural and her background, right, her cultural intuition into her reading and into her research. Most of what I bring to bear on my research emanates from my cultural lens and identity as a Pueblo Indian woman. Okay, so she's talking about her research, but here, I don't like this answer choice at all. Presenting her research to a Pueblo community other than her own. As if she's only presenting her research to other Pueblo communities. She's presenting her research to other people. So to this one, other than her own, this type of trap is called perfect answer, apart from this one word. Let's go to B. Reading a portrayal of Kivas in a Pueblo book. Well, we actually did this here, and we could see where she's bringing her own experience in her reading and her research. I like that, but let's consider A. Learning about Bruchak's perspective on ancient traditional tales. Well, similarly, and then it's just the perspective. This is thus storytelling. She doesn't even make any comments about it. She doesn't say that she's bringing her own experience. So A is out. The answer is B. Hope you guys agree with me. And then here, we only have 27 and 29 left. The passage author connects her knowledge of the distinctions between and across American Indian tribal nations to her experiences as. Okay, so she is connecting the differences between the nations to her experiences as an elder. Well, that's just silly. There are elders in the passage, but she's not talking about her experience as an elder. An editor of the picture book marketed as Native American Folk Tales. Again, Native American Folk Tales is here, but is she an editor? We don't know that. We don't know who she is. She is a researcher. It says right here, as a scholar in American Indian Studies. She's not an editor for this one, so they're just trying to confuse you. Okay. B, a friend of McDermott. She's not his friend. Never anywhere does it say that they were friendly with each other. Therefore, okay, I kind of got it. A scholar of American Indian Studies. A scholar in American Indian Studies. This is a very typical restatement. And then you could be 100% sure that you got this one right. 29. Which of the following characteristics among the several Pueblo communities in New Mexico does the passage author most directly use as evidence of their diversity? Okay, so what it's asking us is, what does the author use, or what does the author say about Pueblo communities in New Mexico as evidence of their diversity? All right, so she's talking about it here. For instance, my home Pueblo is very different from other Pueblos in New Mexico, among which there are several different language groups. Okay, easy breezy. A, there are vast geographic differences. We don't see that. There are disparity of resources. We did not talk about resources at all. There are varied approaches to parenting, not at all. And then there are several different language groups. Here you go, because this is a direct restatement. Now, let's go and check the answers. The answers are, we went from question 21. Just look here. 21. B, 22. G, 23. D, G, D. 24 was G. 25 was C. 26 was H, 27 was A, 28 was G, 29 was D, and 30 was J. So 100% accuracy, go me. And yeah, so I hope this was helpful for you guys and you get an idea of what my process is. I'm not saying that my process is the best process, but this is something that works, and it works for so many of my students. First I read the blurb, then I read the questions, prime my brain for what to look for, because in this little passage there were so many details, and the only 10 details that we needed to pay attention to. You can prime yourself early on and know what to look for. And I really like to answer questions as I'm reading, because I can't count on my brain remembering and retaining all the details. And once I know how to evaluate my answer choices and how to identify traps and how I look for restatements and demonstrations, becomes really easy. Let me know what you are getting on your ACT reading. Are you getting a 35 or a 36? If you're getting something different, please post comments below this video. Give this video a thumbs up. Share it with friends, and because they also deserve a free tutor who can help them raise their scores. And don't forget, every time you post a comment, you enter into a draw of people who can win free tutoring. Every month we get someone lucky, and the results are posted on my Instagram. The Instagram is Seberson Method, and I hope you like this video. Bye.